Riding mowers come into a shop broken in about 3 ways, and after enough of them, I quit taking the work. So here is the whole deal in one go. Why most of these machines aren't worth repairing. The 4 things on a spec sheet that separate a 15-year mower from a 5-year one. And the only 3 riding mowers I'd hand over my own money for. Not the 3 that get advertised hardest. The 3 I'd actually buy. I've had enough of these apart to know what the inside of a hydrostatic transaxle looks like when it's cooked, and the thing that gets me is that the machine is almost never worn out. The engine is usually fine, the frame's fine. One sealed lump under the seat gave up, and the arithmetic on replacing that lump is close enough to the price of a new mower that people just buy a new mower. That's not an accident of engineering. Somebody made a decision and you've been quietly paying for it ever since. 3 flags before we get moving, because you'll want to stick around for them. The 3rd machine on my list is the only one of the 3 with a spin-on oil filter on each drive unit. The same idea as the filter on your truck. On a mower, most people would call a homeowner machine. And it carries a 5-year, 750-hour warranty in a private yard. 2nd flag. One of the most respected consumer testing outfits in the country put a green lawn tractor at the top of its rankings this year. And that tractor rides on the exact transaxle I tell people to walk away from. I'll explain where I part company with them and where they're probably right and I'm wrong. 3rd flag. And this is the one that'll stay with you. Near the end, I'm going to read you 2 published statements about the same gearbox. One from the tractor maker, one from the company that built the gearbox. And you'll see the gap you've been standing in. Start with why I don't fix them, because that sets up everything else. A riding mower is not a car. When a car eats a transmission, you weigh a $4,000 repair against a $20,000 replacement, and the repair usually wins. On a mower, the numbers collapse toward each other until they touch. Most repair shops charge between $55 and $135 an hour for labor. Some as much as $170, and shops often carry a minimum charge of $50 to $130 before anyone touches anything, plus another $30 to $100 if they have to come get the machine. That's before parts. Replacing a riding mower's transmission can run up to $2,500. Meanwhile, a riding mower at a big box store averages around $2,000. Do that math on a 5-year-old machine. $200 of diagnosis and hauling. A transaxle. 3 hours of labor at a shop rate that has gone up every year since I started paying attention. Then you hand it back to a customer whose deck spindles are also on borrowed time and whose engine has never had the valves checked. One repair specialist's rule is to replace the machine when the repair will run past 50 to 80% of replacement cost, or when the mower is past half its expected life. And honestly, that rule kills most of the jobs that get offered to me. So I stopped. And the moment you stop repairing, you start caring intensely about what you buy, because buying is now the whole strategy. Here's what actually kills these machines, in order. Number 1 by a mile is the hydrostatic drive, the sealed unit under your seat that turns engine power into wheel speed with fluid instead of gears. Number 2 is the deck, spindles, bearings, and the sheet metal itself rusting out around the mounts. Number 3 is everything electric, the safety switch circuit and the clutch that engages the blades. The engine is almost never the reason a mower dies. Get that straight in your head and half the marketing you're about to be shown becomes noise. 4 things I check before anything else. Not the horsepower. Not the cup holder. Check 1 is the transaxle model number. And this is the single highest value thing in this video. Inside that aluminum case is a small variable pump and a small motor, both spinning against flat plates with fluid between them. Nothing touches in theory. In practice, the fluid gets hot, gets old, thins out, and the parts start kissing. Then you get the classic symptom every shop knows. It mows fine for 20 minutes. Then it won't pull the hill it pulled last week. And it whines going up. That's not your belt. That's smearing on the pump and motor faces. The unit you want to know about by name is the Tuff Torq K46, built by Kawasaki. Tuff Torq's own people put more than 5 million of them in the field, which is worth saying out loud because it cuts both ways. It's the most common transaxle on Earth for this class of machine, so it's also the most complained about, and forms oversample failures the same way a hospital oversamples sick people. I'll be straight with you, nobody publishes real failure rates by model, so anyone telling you a hard percentage is guessing. What I can tell you is what I see on benches. One owner reported his K46 in a Husqvarna quit making torque at around 140 hours, 3 seasons in, with broken motor springs and a scored pump face. And on the other side, another has a 2004 John Deere that's cut half an acre weekly for 20-plus Texas summers on unserviced fluid. Both are true. What separates them is heat, weight, slope, and hours. Now the part nobody tells you at the store. Same brand, different model, completely different gearbox. On John Deere's own X300 series, the X330, X350, and X354 get the Kawasaki K46. The X370 gets a K57, and the X380, X384, X390, and X394 get the K58. Same paint, same showroom, same salesman. The difference is under the seat, and the price step between those models is buying you drivetrain, not seat foam. Which brings me to the loop I flagged. Consumer Reports put the John Deere X354 at the top of its lawn tractor list for 2026, on the strength of the highest owner satisfaction and brand reliability scores in its ratings, and that machine runs the K46. I'm not calling them wrong. Their reliability figures come from member surveys over 3 consecutive falls, covering more than 18,000 gas-riding mowers bought new between 2015 and 2025, and that's a bigger sample than my bench will ever be. We're measuring different things. They're measuring what happens to a broad population of owners, most of whom mow flat quarter-acre lawns 30 times a year. I'm measuring what happens to the machine when the ground tilts and the hours pile up. If your yard is flat and small, their answer is probably the better one for you. If you've got slope or acreage, or you tow anything, mine is. On zero turns, the same logic applies with different part numbers. Hydrogear's EZT is the residential unit. The ZT2800 is the first one you can actually service, and the ZT3100 and up are where light commercial starts. The 2800 is generally described as the smallest serviceable unit. You can change the oil and filter, while the EZT is the sealed residential standard. One parts vendor's own service life estimates put the EZT at 800 to 1,500 hours, the ZT2800 at 1,500 to 2,500 plus, and the ZT3400 at $2,500 to $4,000 with maintenance. Treat those as a vendor's ballpark rather than gospel. Nobody's publishing test stand data to the public, but the ranking is right, and the ranking is what you're buying. Check 2 is the deck, and here I want 2 numbers and 1 word. The numbers are steel thickness and deck depth. Deere's 48 and 54-inch axle deep decks are made from 10-gauge steel, which is 0.135 of an inch, about 3.5 millimeters, and the shell runs 4.83 inches deep right across. That depth is doing real work. A deep deck holds a column of air and clippings long enough to stand the grass up and cut it once instead of chopping it 4 times. Thin, shallow decks are why cheap mowers leave stragglers when the grass is damp. The word is spindle. That's the vertical shaft each blade hangs off, riding in bearings inside a housing. On the machines that die young, the spindle housing is stamped steel, with a pressed-in bearing and no way to grease it. So when it starts howling, you replace the whole assembly, times 3 plus labor. On better machines, you get a heavier housing, and on some, a grease fitting. Scag's Hero deck uses aluminum housings with sealed ball bearings, and the deck itself is 2 steel plates with a reinforcement plate right where the spindles mount, which is exactly where I see decks tear, every time. Check 3 is the engine, and I'll spend less time here because the engine is rarely the villain. What I want is a V-twin with cast iron cylinder liners and a proper air filter housing. The Kawasaki F600V, you'll find in the smaller Deeres, is 603cc with cast iron liners. The FR6 in the bigger ones is 726cc air-cooled, also with cast iron liners. Those engines will outlive two transaxles if you change the oil and don't run them with a plugged screen. A single cylinder in a machine that size isn't a scandal. It's just working harder for the same result, and it'll tell you so on hot days. Check 4 takes 15 seconds and saves years. Ask where the parts come from. Not whether the brand is respected, whether a human being within an hour of your house stocks a deck belt for that exact model, and whether they'll still have one in 8 years. Dealer-supported machines age well for this one boring reason. Box store models get superseded, renamed, and orphaned. So that's the frame. Gearbox, deck, engine, parts counter. 4 checks, and notice that only one of them is anything a salesman leads with. From here on, I'm naming actual machines, actual prices, and where each one lets you down, because all 3 of these have a weakness, and I'd rather you hear it from me than find it in year 4. The first one is the one most people should buy, the second is the one almost nobody considers, and the third is the one with the filters I promised you. Number 1 is the John Deere X380, or its power-steered cousin, the X390. One dealer network across New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania lists the 2026 X380 with the 48-inch deck at $5,799 and the 54-inch version at just over $6,000. That's real money for a lawnmower, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. Here's what it buys: a K58 transaxle instead of a K46, a 23-horsepower V-twin, the Axle deep deck, and a 4-year, 300-hour bumper-to-bumper warranty. On the power steering models, replaceable bushings at the axle pivot and steering spindles, with a grease cavity between them and a grease fitting at each spindle. Which sounds like nothing until you've fought a worn steering spindle on a machine that has none. Why does the K58 matter so much when it's the same idea as the K46? Bigger pump and motor, more oil, more case to shed heat into. A hydrostatic drive doesn't die of mileage, it dies of temperature. Every time that fluid gets hot enough to thin out, the film between the pump face and the plate gets thinner, and metal starts polishing metal. Go up a slope with a full bagger, and you're asking that small pump for maximum pressure at low flow, which is the worst possible combination for heat. That's why the same transaxle survives 20 years in Ohio flatland and dies in 3 on a Pennsylvania hillside. It's not build quality, it's duty cycle. And here's the honest caveat, because I don't want to sell you the green paint as a personality. Even on the X380, the transaxle's oil filter is listed as internal, not replaceable. You're getting a better gearbox, not an openable one. The deck is stamped steel, not a fabricated commercial deck. And if you buy an X350 because it's the same color and $800 less, you've bought the K46 and none of what I've just described. That's the whole point of check 1. Who's this for? Someone with half an acre to 2 acres, moderate slopes, who wants a bagger, a snowblade in winter, maybe a small cart. It's the most useful shape of machine for an average American property, and it's the one I'd buy if I could only own one. Now, if you don't need attachments and you don't have hills, there's a machine hardly anyone puts on their list, and it's built 40 minutes north of Atlanta. Number 2 is the Kubota T2290. Kubota's T-Series is assembled in Gainesville, Georgia, with a choice of Briggs or Kawasaki twin-cylinder engines, and a fabricated steel deck in 42 or 48 inches, with anti-scalp rollers. Fabricated means formed and welded from plate rather than pressed out of a single sheet, and it matters most at the edges and the spindle mounts. The front axle is ductile cast iron, and the turning radius is 14 inches, which is tight enough that you stop hating the trees in your yard. Dealer listings show the 2026 42-inch model with a 4-year, 300-hour warranty, and one dealer spec sheet for the 48-inch version lists a 21.5 horsepower Kawasaki FR651V with a Hydrogear G730 transmission. I'll flag that last bit as uncertain on purpose. Kubota's own consumer literature just says hydrostatic. The transaxle model comes from dealer listings, and I couldn't verify it from the factory. Ask the dealer, in writing, before you sign anything. And if you're about to spend $5,000, that is not a rude question. That's the only question. The reason Kubota's on this list at all. In Consumer Reports member survey data, Kubota earned exemplary reliability scores among lawn tractors, with Snapper scoring excellent among zero turns, and John Deere very good in both categories. Kubota is the one brand in that data that outranks the one everybody assumes wins. The catch is availability and resale. It's dealer only. The attachment ecosystem is nothing like Deere's. And if you ever sell it, you'll be explaining what it is to buyers who've only heard of two brands. Used ones run roughly $2,730 to $4,195 depending on year and hours, which from where I sit is a used market that looks awfully attractive to a patient buyer. 2 machines down, 1 to go, and it's the one I'd take for a big property. If you're finding this useful, subscribing is the whole ask. It costs you nothing, and it's how these keep coming. Because before we get to that third mower, I have to show you why the drive units on it are built completely differently, and after it, the 2 published sentences I promised you at the start. Number 3 is the Scag Liberty Z, and more broadly, the class it belongs to, the entry machine from a commercial mower company, rather than the top machine from a homeowner brand. That distinction is worth everything. A homeowner brand's flagship is designed down to a price, so it can sit next to a competitor's flagship on the same aisle. A commercial company's entry model is designed down from a machine that has to survive being used 40 hours a week by someone who doesn't own it. Different starting point, different bones. Dealer cash prices in 2026 run around $5,146 for a 42-inch model with a Kohler engine, and about $5,530 for a 42-inch with a Kawasaki FR. Right in the same money as the Deere. Here's what's different. The drive is dual hydro transaxles, Tuff Torq TZ450, or Hydrogear ZT2800 or ZT3100 depending on the model. And this is the loop I flagged in the first minute. Those transaxles have spin-on oil filters. The frame is tubular steel, and the non-commercial warranty is 5 years or 750 hours, with 3 years on the Kawasaki or Kohler engine. A spin-on filter on a lawn mower drive unit sounds like a small thing. It is not a small thing. It means the manufacturer has accepted in the design that the fluid in there will get dirty and that you will change it. That this machine is expected to be maintained rather than discarded. Every design choice downstream of that assumption gets better. The case has a drain. The service manual has an interval. The dealer has a filter on the shelf. The blade drive gets the same treatment. The PTO clutch is an Ogura GT1 with 74 foot-pounds of holding strength and an adjustable air gap. Translation: the electric clutch that grabs the blades wears a friction face over time, and on most machines, when the gap grows past spec, the clutch stops grabbing and you buy a new one for several $100s. On this one, you shim the gap back into range and carry on. That's a 5-minute job standing in your own garage versus a parts order. And it's the kind of difference that never appears in a side-by-side comparison chart. Now the honest side, because this machine is wrong for a lot of people. A zero turn is worse than a lawn tractor on a real slope. The drive wheels carry the steering, and once they break traction on wet grass, you're a passenger. It won't tow much, and it isn't meant to. Bagging and snow work are afterthoughts compared with a tractor. It takes most people 2 or 3 cuts to stop scalping corners. And to be fair about the branding, the Liberty is a homeowner machine wearing a commercial company's badge, built for people who want the professional cut without the commercial price. It is not the machine on the back of a landscaper's trailer. The spindles are sealed ball bearings, not greasable, and the light models carry the smaller transaxles. The same reasoning gets you to the equivalent machines from the other commercial houses. The entry zero turns from Exmark, Toro's heavier Titan range, Gravely, Ferris. I'm naming the Scag because I know its parts availability and the warranty terms are published plainly. Buy the class, not the badge, and check the transaxle model on whichever one your dealer stocks. Before the ugly part, one piece of history that explains why you can't trust the biggest number on the sticker. For decades, the number on the side of a mower engine was the largest one the engineering department could defend. One of the specific allegations was that manufacturers were quoting gross horsepower, a theoretical maximum, rather than net horsepower, which is what the engine actually makes with an air filter and muffler attached. Briggs & Stratton and other outdoor power equipment makers agreed to settle more than 65 class actions over misleading horsepower labeling, with the settling defendants establishing a $51 million fund. Honda paid $7.5 million, Kohler $3.5 million, Kawasaki $3 million, and Sears, Deere, Tecumseh, Briggs, Toro, Electrolux, and Husqvarna collectively $51 million, covering American purchases between January 1994 and April 2010. The settlement could have covered more than 30 million engines. Two things came out of it. Several of those companies agreed to a uniform, certified power rating standard, with published test results. And the industry quietly moved to labeling engines by displacement in cubic centimeters and by torque instead of horsepower, which is why the numbers on mower engines got confusing right around then. That's the part I want you to hold on to. When a number becomes legally awkward, it doesn't get corrected. It gets replaced with a different number nobody has litigated yet. Which brings us to the two sentences. Here is what the machine's own spec sheet tells you about the transaxle. Oil filter. Internal, not replaceable. That's it. No interval, no fluid type, no drain plug in the casting, no procedure in the owner's manual. Sealed. The word you'll hear at the counter is maintenance-free. And if you ask a dealer whether it needs servicing, the honest answer he'll give you is that on a sealed unit, no maintenance is recommended. Here is what the company that actually builds that gearbox publishes. For light-duty units, changing the fluid is typically not recommended. However, if the customer insists on changing the fluid, then it should be done at 50 hours, the break-in period, and then every 250 hours. Read that again because it's carefully done. They didn't say it doesn't need fluid changes. They said it isn't recommended, and then published the interval anyway, for the customer who insists. There is only one reason to know that a part wants fresh fluid every 250 hours, and simultaneously to build the case with nowhere to drain it from. Follow the money on your side of the counter. The bumper-to-bumper warranty on these tractors is 4 years or 300 hours. The interval the gearbox maker publishes is 250. So the first service the unit genuinely wants falls right about where your coverage runs out. And by then, the fluid has spent every one of those hours cooking, carrying whatever wore off the pump face with it. You didn't skip that service. You were never told it existed. The manual you were handed is the one that came in the box. And when it does go, you don't get an intervention. There's no filter to cut open, no drain plug to pull, no bearing to press out at the counter. To change the fluid at all, you have to drop the whole transaxle out of the machine and turn it upside down, which is why owners who care end up drilling and tapping their own drain plugs into a casting that should have come with them. 2 plugs and 2 crush washers. Pennies of hardware left out. Nobody sat in a room and decided to hurt you. Somebody costed a plug, a boss in the casting, a filter and a line in the manual, and every one of those items lost to the argument that a homeowner mows 30 hours a year and won't reach the interval before the warranty is gone. In aggregate, they're right. On your machine, on your hill with your bagger, they may be dead wrong. And you were never given the information to know which case you're in. That's the trick, not a lie. A silence, priced out to 4 decimal places. Now you know. And you'll never look at the words maintenance-free the same way again, on a mower or anything else, because that phrase almost never describes the part. It describes the plan for the part. There's something underneath all this that goes wider than mowers, and it isn't really about corporations at all. The skill that saves people money stopped being repair a while back. My hands are less valuable now than my judgment, and that's a strange thing for a guy who likes taking things apart to admit. But it's true. The most useful 10 minutes you'll ever spend on a $5,000 purchase isn't in the garage afterwards. It's standing in front of the machine with the spec sheet, knowing which 4 lines on it are load-bearing and which 20 are decoration. That's a transferable skill, and it's the one worth handing to your kids. Every category has its 4 lines. On a washing machine, it's the bearing and how the drum is supported. On a truck, it's the transmission and the cooling. On a mower, it's the gearbox, the deck steel, the spindles, and whether anybody near you stocks parts. The specifics change, and the habit doesn't. Find the part that decides the machine's lifespan. Find out whether the design lets you look after it, and let the brochure argue with itself about everything else. People call that cynicism. It isn't. It's respect for good work, and impatience with the other kind. When a company puts a spin-on filter on a homeowner's drive unit, they're telling you they expect the machine to be alive in 10 years. That's a promise made in metal instead of adjectives, and I've never once seen it broken. So the whole thing in order. Before you buy, get the transaxle model number in writing. Not the brand, not the horsepower. The model of the drive unit. On lawn tractors, K46 is the light-duty one, and the step up to a K57 or K58 is the single best money in the entire transaction. On zero turns, the EZT is the light one. The ZT2800 is the first serviceable one, and 3100 and up is where light commercial starts. Then ask one follow-up. Does it have a drain plug and a replaceable filter, yes or no? Their answer tells you what the machine was designed to become. Next, run your own numbers instead of a rule of thumb. Count your actual mowing weeks in a year and how long a cut takes you. A half acre with a 42-inch deck is roughly an hour, so most homeowners are somewhere near 30 hours a season. Divide the price by the hours the drive unit is rated for, and see what a mowing hour actually costs you. 800 hours of light-duty transaxle at 30 hours a season is 26 seasons on paper, which sounds fine right up until you put a slope, a bagger, and a 2-acre lot into it and watch that number get cut in half. If your honest answer is under 40 hours a year on flat ground, the light machine is not a mistake, and I'm not going to pretend it is. If it's more than that, or there's a hill involved, step up the drivetrain and buy the smaller deck if you have to. Deck width you can live without. Gearbox you cannot. Then the deck itself. Ask the gauge of the steel and the depth of the shell, and put your hand up under the spindle mounts on the display model. If it's thin sheet with a pressed-in bearing and nowhere for grease to go, that's 3 assemblies you'll be buying somewhere in year 6. 10 gauge or better, a reinforcement plate at the spindles, and anti-scalp rollers you can actually adjust. Engine, keep it simple. V-twin if the budget reaches, cast iron liners. And an air filter you can get to without tools. Change the oil on the schedule and clean the cooling fins on the flywheel screen twice a season, because a plugged screen is the one way people genuinely do kill these engines. And last, before you sign anything, phone the nearest dealer and ask if they stock a deck belt and a spindle for that exact model number. Not the family. The model. If the answer is a pause, buy something else. For the machines themselves. The X380 or X390 if you want one mower that does everything. Roughly $5,800 with the 48-inch deck. The Kubota T2290 if you have a flat property, no need for attachments, and a Kubota dealer you trust. And look hard at the used ones between $2,000 and $5,000, because that market is quietly generous. The Scag Liberty Z, or the equivalent entry machine from any of the commercial houses if you've got acreage. And you want the drive units to have filters on them, around $5,200 to $5,500. Do that and here's what happens. Nothing. That's the payoff. Somewhere around year 7, when the neighbor who bought the same colored machine for $800 less is loading his onto a trailer to find out what a transaxle costs. Yours starts on the first turn of the key and you go and cut the grass. There's no moment of triumph in it. There's just a bill that never arrives, every year, quietly, for a decade. And the only reason it never arrives is that you spent 10 minutes reading the right 4 lines on a spec sheet instead of the big number on the hood. Now, tell me where I'm wrong, and I mean that literally. Some of you have K46s with 15 or 20 seasons on them, and never a drop of fluid changed. And you think I've been unfair to a gearbox that has done nothing but serve you. Come and say so, but bring the details, because they're the whole argument. Tell me the hours, the slope, whether you bag, and what your summers are like where you live. That's the data nobody publishes, and between all of you it exists. And if you've drilled and tapped your own drain plugs into one, say what you used and where you put them, because that comment is worth more to the next person watching than half of what I just said. Subscribe if you want more of these. I'd rather have people here who came for the spec sheet than the paint. The thread I didn't pull today is the electric clutch, and it's been bothering me for a while. There's a whole argument about whether the switch to electric blade engagement was about safety, or about eliminating a linkage that a homeowner could adjust with a wrench. And every time I start digging into it, I find another patent that makes me want to keep digging. That one's coming once I'm satisfied I've got it right. Until then, check the number under the seat before you check the price on the hood.